Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I had a request for someone who has to leave the meeting by 6:30 if they could come and make a public comment. We will have other public comments as the presentations go, but this person had asked, since they had to leave, if they could come up and speak before they go, so I'm going to allow that right now.
My voice isn't loud enough, Sean. I don't need that, actually. You know that. Yeah. Okay. For you those that do not know me, I was on the school board for 12 years for Lewiston, so I know what you're going through with the budget. It's not easy. I'm also a registered nurse of 49 years, and I'm here to talk about there's only one nurse proposed for the Connors School. My understanding was when I was on the building committee for Connors School, I am still on the building committee for Connors School, that there would be 2 nurses at Connors School. And I heard, I have to point to Mr. Webster, he said that we would have 2 nurses. At Connors School, there are 2, if you haven't had a tour, there are 2 offices for 2 nurses. Okay, right now we have 1 full-time nurse at Martell. We have 1 full-time nurse who will speak later at Longley School. Why are we cutting down for the same population that's going into Connors School with 1 nurse? Now there's many, many reasons why, and I'm also Lewiston, chair of Lewiston Public Health Committee, and I represent the school department on Lewiston Public Health Committee. Reasons, the most important reason is health and safety of the students and staff. Majority of students are from downtown area, and there's a high poverty rate from the downtown area, and I have subbed both in Martell and Longley, and I know where these students come from and the problems, health, emotional, poverty, and everything else these students have. The school nurse may or not be the only medical care that these students see. Usually after kindergarten, many students do not go to a doctor anymore. Believe it or not, this is true. School nurses pick up patterns compared to sometimes the teachers don't. I had a boy, 12 years old, that came in every day for 3 days in a row at 12:50. I sat down with him and I said, for a headache. I sat down with him and I said, why are you coming in at this time? What class do you have? He said, math. So I questioned him. I said, do you like math? He says, no, I don't like math and I'm not doing. So what I did is I talked to the teacher and said, this boy is having trouble with math. As a school nurse, I found this out. Do you know this young man never came to see me again at that time? Because the teacher was able to discuss with him about his math problems. And sometimes teachers don't realize that students do come to the nurses with a headache or other physical problems. Okay, interpreter. Let me tell you, it takes much longer to have an interpreter than it does just somebody that can come in and speak your language. Usually, sometimes with a student that needs, where we need an interpreter for the family and call in, it can take over half an hour for a visit. So if one nurse is busy with 1 student, which I have been before in subbing, what's going to happen to the other students? Okay, there's an emergency out on the playground. If you looked at Connors School, the playgrounds are all apart. Now people tell me Montello, I know Montello has more students than Connors will have at the beginning of school next year. But Connors School, if you haven't walked it, it's big in area. And the school nurse's office is right next to administration office, which is right the entrance. How are they going to get down there? Also recommending about 6 wheelchairs for Connors School. Okay, documentation. Nurses have a lot of documentation. Health records, 504 records, all kinds of things. Special ed records, seizure plans, asthma plans, diabetics. Let me tell you about diabetics today and the insulin pump. When we have diabetics in the school, and I was at Farwell School subbing, one diabetic with an insulin pump, first grader, came in at least 5 times in a day because I had to monitor what he ate, how much insulin he needed, if he had recess, if he had physical ed, and the insulin pump is very, very complicated and can be very dangerous. Emergencies, playground. Nurses out in the playground, another emergency, kids lined up in the office. Again, you've got a huge area school here. But the thing is, I don't understand it. You already have one full-time nurse at Martel, and you have one full-time nurse at Longley again. Nurses sometimes are the first person to pick up that the child is depressed emotionally. In fact, I know of a child that I did call one of our nurses because I knew this child was having problems in my neighborhood with depression and cutting herself. But I wanted the school to know. Yeah, okay. There's a lot of things, and chronic diseases, there's an increased rate in chronic allergies. I'll list a mile long in every school of allergies. EpiPens. I finished point out again that health and safety of our students are priority. If a child is unhealthy, they will not learn. This is a proven fact. Nurses are the first, just as important in the school as teachers in the learning phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think our first presentation is Farwell Elementary School. Thank you. Would it be okay if I went over the documents that I handed out first? Okay. Yeah, you can sit. You can sit with me. So, in your handouts, you'll notice that you have an updated cost summary report, and on the top I put a little red R. It's just revised. So make sure, if it were me, I'd take the old one out and put this one in so you don't get them confused. And what I did was I updated Connor's, and I think that there was some confusion perhaps Monday evening where I broke out regular instruction and the pre-K 2 expenses, so I consolidated those. So it'll be easier for you to tie out the slideshow to your document. Alicia, you had asked, and I hope I got it right, but you had asked to sort the priority list based on priorities. Was that correct? So they're all ones are together without totals and all twos are together. Okay. Let's see. And then there's the flagged essential items handout. And so there's 7 items on this sheet. It looks like this. These are the items that you had made a recommendation that I put down onto this sheet, so we can discuss these at a later date. If you'll take a look at those, and if I'm missing something, please let me know. And then there was a data request. Tina, you had made a data request for co-curricular and extracurricular. So I did that. I broke it out based on elementary school versus high school. So you'll see your co-curricular at the top, which are all of our activities and clubs, and then at the bottom is extracurricular, which are all of our sports. There was a question Monday evening about how many 504s we have at the high school, and we counted 124. And then as far as the request around Ice Week and Mud Week and costing that out, I'm still working on that, and once I get all of that together, I'll make sure that you have that.
going to discuss Farwell Elementary. Amanda is with us. And so it'll be the same format as we did Monday evening. I'll introduce the school, which I just did, and then we'll go right into the highlights, and you'll get to discuss those. And then it'll be the cost drivers after that.
Are we going to receive the slides as a handout?
So I forgot to print those. So yes, you will. I'll make sure that you get copies of those for your book. Let's talk about these.
Yeah. So one of the things that Farwell, I'm really proud of at Farwell is that we do have STEM classes every week for all students. We currently have an EdTech doing this role. So she spends half of her day doing STEM classes for students, and then the rest of her day is spent doing interventions. The other elementary schools in Lewiston have a teaching position doing their STEM work, so I would like a teaching position as well to do our STEM work. We also have a pretty low to student-teacher ratio. Our classrooms, some of them are not as low as we'd like them to be, but for the most part, we have 20 or under, 20 or less students per classroom. We do quite a bit of math and reading intervention work, especially focused at the K-3 level. So this would be where our STEM teacher comes in. So I would like to hire a STEM teacher. Half of her day would be doing STEM classes, and the rest of her day would be doing some math intervention work for, like I said, mostly focused at the K-3 level. We also spend a lot of time doing restorative practice work, and this is something that we're very proud of. What we do in the office as far as when students come to us for discipline concerns is we really focus on working the problem out. It's not just consequence. It's more about digging to the bottom of the problem and figuring out what's going on and working to repair the situation. And we're expanding that work into teachers having more capacity to do this work as well. So that's where a lot of our professional development is focused on this year and will continue for next year.
So we're going to move right into the cost drivers. So at Farwell, and again, we're discussing regular instruction, guidance, library, school administration, and then and extracurricular activities. And so we'll start with regular instruction. Overall, at Farwell, the regular instruction account is up 2.07%. And you can see right above that, it's broken out based on salaries and benefits. I did go into a little more detail with this one, just to let you know some of the cuts that occurred within that article. So we paved the way a little bit for some technology equipment. So there's this instructional supplies and instructional equipment that has decreased. We have technology equipment that we've put in that's replacement of technology devices for students. And so overall, that article is up $34,975 or 2.07%. Guidance is up. There's a 25% increase, and I'm like, what is that? So I drilled into that, and that actually there's some benefit, and you'll notice this throughout some of our schoolhouses. Each year there may be benefit adjustments that occur, so somebody might take a benefit and then they may, at open enrollment take something different. So oftentimes what drives those benefit increases is that. And then there are library services. We are up 10.96%. That is all salaries and benefits driven. And school administration there's an increase of roughly 0.5%. And that looks a little weird, and Amanda actually called me. She's like, I think your numbers are wrong. but they're not, and she gave me a heart attack. But they're not wrong. So there is a salary increase in school administration, but there's also a benefit decrease that offsets that increase. And then co-curricular is up 19.91% or $900. So that's salaries and benefits that go along for those stipends. And then the extracurricular is up 3.6%. Same thing, it's all derivative. There's nothing new in there for stipends. And then we have a list of essential items that are not included. You will find this on your handout as well. There's a grade 5 teacher. We have instructional equipment that Amanda has asked for. The extended school day, extended school year, teacher of $25,000, as well as supplies that go along with that program of $1,500, and an RTI teacher. And we use the $60,000 number. That includes benefits as well. So we try to average that out. That is it for Farwell.
Thank you. Principal Winslow, what happened to your 3rd, 6th grade class? That is not on the enrollment projections?
Three fifth grades? No? Okay.
And as a result, would that be broken out? So it's 44 students, just an average number in each of the 3? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you explain why the regular ed summer school budget is more than doubled?
Can you?
I can. So Farwell had a very small budget for summer school. It was actually under $10,000. But this past year, we did apply and receive a Title I reallocation grant of approximately $24,000. So with that additional money, we were able to offer summer school to all students. So what's in the regular budget that we're asking for would be closer to what what we had last year without the grant. We never know if the grant will become available. If it does, we will certainly apply for the grant and hopes to receive it. But if it doesn't, we would like to offer the same level of summer school program that we did last year.
So is this enrichment summer school or is this recovery summer school?
It's sort of a combination of both. We actually called it a STEM summer camp, but we did take data for the grant, and 80% of our students grew in a reading level, one or more reading levels. We focused on science, technology, engineering, and math, but students were, we had certain criteria that we needed to follow for the grant. And we did find, like I said, that 80% of our students increased in their ability to read. But we did not focus our enrollment on students who were specifically below level. It was open and available to any student at Farwell.
I should have asked all my questions at once. I apologize. I don't mean to question in the way this is going to sound, but didn't a school last year give up their STEM teacher for another guidance position? Okay, I'll ask later.
And it wasn't Farwell, so I believe it was McMahon. Amber can speak about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Madam Chair, if we did add the additional 5th grade teacher, do you have room available in the school?
Absolutely. We had maneuvered a physical plan thinking this 5th grade teacher was coming. It's the only grade level left with 2 classroom teachers. All the other grade levels have 3. So we were under, we were in hopes that we were getting that teacher. So we do have a classroom. It's currently our special education classroom. We'll be doing some shifting upstairs to make that room available.
Classroom size is one of my big priorities, so if we could add that to the list, I'd be appreciative. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Classroom size, meaning square footage, or are you talking about students? Okay.
Student population.
Okay.
Great follow-up question.
So if I don't see anybody else, but I'd like to talk a little bit about STEM. Can you tell me, so you said you wanted it to be a teaching position because now it's an EdTech position. So can you talk about what that looks like as a teacher? Are you talking about the qualifications of a teacher? Are you talking about how that is designed? Will they have a classroom? Can you just give me the bigger picture?
So currently, we have an EdTech performing that role, and there are there's STEM standards that we ask the STEM teachers to follow. She does follow those standards, but she does not have access to Power Teacher, so she does not score standards in the electronic system. She also has a little bit more time in her day for planning because she does not plan outside of her contract hours. She does not attend. It's the difference basically between an EdTech position and a teaching position. She's an hourly paid position as opposed to a salary paid position. Mm-hmm. I want it to be a teaching position just like the other elementary schools, where she would be responsible for the scoring of standards. She would be doing the planning on her own. She would be, like I said, responsible mostly for the standards.
Is this position considered a unified arts position? I've heard that in other schools it is. So how many students would this one person be responsible for, and what does that rotation look like?
So it would be all the students at Farwell, but it would be one classroom at a time. So it would be approximately 20 or 22, maybe 18 students at a time that they would be in their STEM class for 40 minutes a day. Nope. So what they have: phys ed, STEM, music, art, and library every week. So each one is a 40-minute block. So the STEM teaching, the position at Farwell is based on the amount of time that we would need it for. It would be a half-time responsibility, half-time teaching position. And then the other half of the time, I would pay for that out of our Title I funds, and that would be a math intervention time. The teacher would be focused on math interventions. So really what's in the budget is a half-time STEM teacher.
So my concern is that I don't know how one person can do that and in addition be a math intervention person. How does that fit into their schedule when they're doing the entire school, 40 minutes each slot?
That's what we do now. We have 40-minute blocks throughout the day. I can certainly forward you a copy of our schedule if you'd like to see that. But they meet with 4 classes every day, so that would be 20 classes a week that they meet with.
Well, just to provide a little more information. So while Farwell is a relatively large school by Maine standards, it will be our smallest elementary school. So the STEM teacher there can service all the classes in less than a full day schedule, whereas the STEM teachers at the other schools that have 700 thereabouts students are needed to be in the STEM lab the whole day in order to meet the needs of all students.
Thank you. Ms. Ray.
So picking at that a little bit more, what was the dollar amount again for that position?
So that position, and actually it's an ed tech that's already in the budget, and we're asking to change that from an ed tech to a teacher. So Bill, I don't know if that's going to be much more than what's already there.
So it would be, I believe, approximately another $24,000 to upgrade that existing position from ed tech to teacher.
And you would not be backfilling the ed tech position?
No, the ed tech is going to be a Title I ed tech, is that correct? Yeah, so we'll move to the title, be covered by the title budget.
So we're adding a position, not converting it, right? Like,
well, it's the same bodies, but it's a higher grade position, so the salary increase is $24,000.
But you have to hire somebody to be the STEM teacher because the ed tech is not qualified, right?
Correct.
So it's adding a position, but it doesn't feel like a full position because it's not an entire salary. It's half.
So the overall salary would be based on the 60K.
So it would be adding about 25,000, roughly, because we already have some money in there that we're paying currently. So imagine, so we've got an ed tech sitting there and we're paying them, and so the difference between what we're paying them and what we actually need for that to be a teaching position would be that. So it would be around 25,000. Does that make sense? No?
Math-wise, it makes sense, but I'm trying to say you are keeping an ed tech position, even though it's going to Title I, and you are adding a teaching position.
So currently, what is your Title I money used for, and how much is left over to cover this ed tech position?
So we currently use our Title I funds to pay, we have 2 ed techs, we have a couple coaches, and some of it's for salaries and parent involvement. That's about it. Farwell doesn't get, I don't know the number right off the top of my head. But yes, I do believe, based on some information that some of them have given me about their wishes, their desires for next year, I do think that we would have the money to be able to do that.
I might be jumping the gun, but are you going to talk about special ed in here, or are you all set?
So special ed will be another night. It'll be next week that we'll
Okay.
discuss that.
Okay. Just looking at the overall school budget, so that'll be another night. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Connors Elementary. I was supposed to allow for public comment on anybody who had anything to say in between for the schools. I want to be fair. I did give somebody time to talk before we even started. So does anyone from the public have any comments regarding the Farwell Elementary School budget? Okay, thanks.
Oh, this is Connors Elementary School, the very first budget that we put together for this elementary school. It's pretty exciting. And so we're going to go right into what Don has to say.
So if you notice, the first thing that's on the wish list of things that we would have included in our priority budgets is a creation of an alternative program at Connors School for students that are not identified as special education. These are students that oftentimes either cannot be identified or once tested do not qualify for identification under special ed services for things like social maladjustment disorder, or families that may have beliefs that they don't test their students, but that student is still with us. It needs to have some services that the mainstream is just not providing for. So we were looking to create a program similar to what we have in some of our other schools for identified students, but to help with the student population that we have that doesn't fall into the categories that allow them to access those services. With that, we would like to expand our literacy libraries to be more culturally sensitive so that the books represent much of what happens in a lot of our students' lives, so they can relate to that as they're reading, and it would make them become more interested in that reading and allow us to expand the offerings that we have for them. As we all know, we have a lot of trauma inside our district. In the schools that I am in now, that trauma shows daily in the way that students interact with each other, with parents, and with their parents as well. We have spent this year with some of our PD and with folks like Ryan Anderson and with Julia Sleeper working on that with some of our PD with our staff. We would like to become a more trauma-informed school, so we'd like to bring that back so that our teachers can interact with our students at more of a level where they can meet them where they're at. And lastly, one of our priorities is to have more check-ins within the year to gauge where our students are in making yearly progress and against proficiency, so that we're not having a test in the fall and then we don't have results to really work with until the next fall. So we want to have check-ins in the year that we can start with interventions to catch students before they find themselves in a place that it's much more difficult for them to get back to the grade level that they need.
Moving right into the cost drivers for Connors. Again, so we're talking about regular instruction first. Overall, that's up 1.70%. And I've broken out, you know, what it looks like, what that 1.7 looks like. So there's salaries and benefits. There's an all other category. And in that all other, I just rolled a bunch of the decreases up. And, oh, I didn't print out the right one. I'd have to get back. I don't have the right sheet with me, but I'll have to get back to you because I know you'll want to know. So I'll send it out to you. What's that? Yeah. It's basically instructional supplies and instructional equipment is what it is. But I'll get that for you. And then, like I said, the total overall increase is $53,971. Guidance is up 1.82%. And that's a salary and benefit increase of $1,987. Library services is up $8,808. That equals 10.20%. Again, that's driven by salaries and benefits. And then school administration actually has a decrease of 4.59%. There's some benefit enrollment decreases as well as some salary decreases as well. And then the essential items not included, we've added to that list a school resource officer, student transportation, that's 2 school buses in that $105,000 number, a 6th grade teacher, reading recovery teacher, 3 days per diem summer work, extended school year or summer school, medical supplies, and a 2nd nurse. We'll take questions.
Just like to share a little more about Connors. So the school is designed to hold comfortably 900 students at 20 or fewer students per class. I believe the budget for next year has 5 classrooms at all grade levels except 1, I think. And right now, if we add Martell and Longley students together, there are approximately 700 students, which puts it right in line with Montello, McMahon, and Geiger. We know, well, Connors is slated, as I mentioned, to hold additional students. It's hard to know what the enrollment will be starting. Will there be families that have students enrolled in other schools that will want to transfer, or will it be a more systematic increase over time? That we don't know. In determining the positions, our initial thought was that anyone who was in Martell and Longley, we would just move to the new school initially. And then as we better understood enrollments, we would make changes and take advantage of retirements or anything else that might come up. Obviously, we're only going to have one hit custodian. But in the case of nurses, which was brought up tonight, the Martell nurse has announced her retirement. And so when it came to figuring out what we were going to put in this initial budget, that 2nd nurse position was cut. And I'm not suggesting that an additional nurse or med tech or something couldn't be helpful. But I don't see, I've also, in thinking about Montello and other schools, you know, I think it's a challenge unless one's going to argue that all of them. At least being adjacent to the high school, the high school has a nurse and the high school has a CNA or med tech position that we added a couple of years ago. It also, there's B Street downtown where some of our other schools, McMahon and Montello in particular, are more isolated. So anyway, those are some of the thoughts, and you're going to know a lot more in a year than you do now about what the enrollment of that school and what the needs are going to be. Thank you.
Ms. Quartermash.
Thank you. Do you have an idea of how many students currently go out of district that by geography should go to Connors?
So yes, we do have excuse me, we do have that number, and there are probably 120 students out of district that in the Martell Long districts go to school elsewhere. There are also probably a number of those smaller of students that are in other districts that go there. And we could put together some information. I think you would find it interesting, because I'll take Montello. If students only went to the school district that they lived in, Montello would have almost 900 students. So school choice has always been a feature since I've been here in Lewiston, and I think before, and unless there is a class size issue, I've always tried to say yes.
Others? Ms. Hutchinson.
So I want to caution that we don't count on the nurse at the high school to be covering other schools. The high school has its own issues with almost 1,500 kids, and they're now going to be responsible for Longley as well. So I really don't want us to get into the habit of thinking, oh, they can pick up the phone and the high school nurse can come running, because the high school nurse is going to have their hands full too. The other schools, Geiger, Montello, McMahon, all have one nurse. Then a second nurse at Connors, to me, is an excess that we could spend the money better elsewhere.
Regarding, I guess, the nurse at Longley, what's the workload like for that person?
I believe that when we get to the public comment, that nurse is with us this evening, and she will have that information for you.
Excellent. And the other question I had, I know you mentioned you'd like an additional 6th grade teacher. Looking in the projected enrollments for next year, I think there are already 4 6th grade teachers, so this would be a 5th? Is that correct?
The way that it works right now is we have 2 6th grades at Longley, and we have 2 6th grades at Martell. But below that, we have 3 5th grades at each building. So that is going to roll forward, of course, and we don't know what our kindergarten projections are yet. So we're not sure if we're going to need 6 kindergartens yet, or if we will need, we know we're going to need 6 in one of those rooms, but we're not sure what that is until we see those projections.
Okay, so you're asking the budget for the extra position, you just haven't applied it somewhere, and this would be an additional request?
We have one 5th grade teacher that's come on this year at Martell Midway that we took other positions and consolidated to cover in budget. So that person is already currently in this year's position, but carried in different, and I don't know if you want to speak to that, Boy, but carried in different payroll lines. Still in Article 1, but carried not as a teacher payroll, as an EdTech payroll.
And just to make clear, so with all that in place, without any additional teaching staff, there's going to be 4 6th grade teachers. Is that right? Am I reading this right?
Yes.
4. Okay. Because I was noticing too, for like the classroom or student sizes, excuse me, should be more clear. Like 23, and I know like McMahon, I think has like 423 student classes for 6th grade, which 6th grade is kind of it's a lot. I just worry that, particularly with the Connors Elementary School, with being highly impacted by poverty, that's going to be a whole lot of, it's going to be a rough year for the 6th grade teachers. Because I've worked with classes that were over 20 students, even like at 20, and it can be a little bit rough. So just as a board, I'd like us to really have that discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Going back to the enrollment projections, it seems we found 45 students When we combined Longley and Martell, where are those numbers coming from?
So, a portion of them are, and I make reference to it in my enrollment memo, we're working on a plan where CDS would fund an additional pre-K room, and it would only serve Lewiston students who might otherwise not be getting services, and this potentially would benefit them throughout their school career. So that in the projection is 16, and then just off the top of my head, let's see, I'm just looking at this year, the Longley 6th grade might have been a little less than the incoming 5th grade.
So that has an enrollment projection implication. Where's the budgetary implication for that? Is that position in here for the CDS, or is that outside of
that
this
is
budget?
going to be fully funded. If we go through with it, it'll be fully funded by CDS.
Okay. At what point will we know that?
I don't know if Assistant Superintendent Shabbat can answer that question.
Could
Mr.
you
Shabbat
please
said
say it
that-
in the
I
mic?
can repeat it.
Thank you.
He just said in the next 30 days. They just met 2 weeks ago for the first time. It's the first time I've heard about it. So I think maybe we should know a little bit more about that too at some point. Anybody else? Oh, Ms. Parks.
Can you elaborate now, somebody, on the busing positions that are being eliminated?
So it's not that buses are being eliminated, but the buses that we had initially wanted to add are not added. We have transportation with Butch Pratt scheduled for next week, and so we'll get into that more detail. But basically, had we been able to keep that money in the budget, we would have essentially been able to bus the families in the Longley district that wanted to take buses. It's certainly doable. It's certainly less than a mile, but it is a relatively long ways compared to situations in a lot of our schools. So we'll talk more about it.
I understand, we'll talk more about it. I just want to follow up that that's a big hill for kids in the Longley district to have to walk up, and generally the population in that part of town is less likely to have transportation. So I would like it if that could be added to our keep list, because I think that that's really important to be able to bus those
Just
students.
there is a path that goes through Franklin Pasture to the school, so we don't anticipate students needing to go up Bartlett Hill, although the students, the Martell students that presently live in the Androscoggin Avenue area, because they're at the top of the hill, would be needing to cross at the new crossing light on Birch Street.
I'm going to ask my question, then I'm going to ask for public comment. But can you talk about STEM at Connors, please?
The way STEM works at Connors is we do have a teacher that does deliver that. It is part of our UA programs. So much like what Amanda talked about, our students are on a rotating schedule with the other unified arts that we do. And that teacher does deliver to all of our students a STEM program on a rotating basis weekly. It's Allison Litton that is that teacher.
So, one teacher doing all of that. What's the difference in numbers between Farwell and Connors?
Well, they're doing, Connors will start with about 700 students. The present STEM teacher that was mentioned services both Longley and Martell. So at 700, it would be similar to the situation at Geiger, McMahon, and Montello.
Who all have one?
Yes.
At this time?
That's correct, yeah.
I'm going to open up the podium. What? Oh, okay, yeah.
Could you just keep the slide up of the things that were cut from the budget? Yeah, or you could email it to us. It helps me think about questions. Thank you.
So at this time, I'm going to open up the podium for public comment. If you come up for public comment, please limit your time to 3 minutes. And make sure that you press the button for the microphone. So if you have a comment, please come forward. Oh, and say your name and where you live, please.
My name is Carol Moytozo. I am the current school nurse at Longley Elementary School. I am also a Lewiston resident. I think I'm in Ward 5. I'm not quite sure. I just want to make a comment about the high school nurse coming to help at Connors. There ain't no way that's going to happen because she's got the high school and the LRTC. How in the world is she ever going to have time for Connors? Anyway, I just want to share with you a day in the life of the school nurse at Longley Elementary School. School nurses are in the services of responsive services, like the local emergency room. The emergency room never knows what's coming in and when they're coming in and what they're going to need. Well, the school nurse is the same, except for the kids that come for meds. We know that's going to happen. Anything else, we have no idea what's coming down the pike. It could be somebody bleeding, it could be breathing issue, it could be an allergic reaction, a seizure, a call to the playground, vomiting, cuts, bruises, an emotional outburst by a kid, a parent dropping in, a doctor calling, a need to make a 911 call. You just don't know. So a nurse is always on. Longley is unique because we have 70% African families in our school. So they come with a whole set of different issues, not problems, but issues, because they're coming into a new country. They're not familiar with education in some cases. They don't speak our languages. I use an interpreter every single day, many times a day, to call families, to help me talk to parents. And when the interpreter isn't available or doesn't speak that language, then I use the language line. And that process takes more time than if I was just picking up the phone and talking to an English-speaking family and telling them what I needed. Medication administration is a huge, very, very important piece because we have many children that need medications on a daily basis. And at this point in time, I've never seen so many African children taking medication. And what we're finding out is that ADHD looks quite similar to trauma. The thing is, which one is it? Is it trauma or is it ADHD? So they're being medicated for the latter when it might be something else. Nevertheless, those meds need to be given on a daily basis. They require an authorization by the parent and the doctor. They also require being refilled. And that may be easy for you and I to call the pharmacy and refill a prescription. But these kids, their parents have to call the doctor's office. They have to go to the pharmacy. They have to bring the medicine to school. That's a very tall order for some of these families. Some because they don't have phones that work, so I can't call them and say, call the doctor. So I have to call the doctor myself. Others, because I still can't get a hold of them, I end up going to the pharmacy to get the medication for them. I'm happy to do that because the kid needs it. And this is the way we can help the child be successful and the parents be successful as well. But the clientele that's in Longley School needs extra support. So support services is a big part of what I do. And I remember back 12 years ago when I was just starting out at Longley, I'd been there maybe 2 or 3 months. I went into the principal's office and I said, wow, I'm not sure I can do this job. It seems to me that I've got all the parents, all the students, and all the staff coming to me. And he said, well, welcome to my world. You're exactly right. That's exactly what's happening. I thought, wow. And really, that is what happens. The parents might drop in at any point in time. Staff come by with questions about students and sometimes about themselves. Of course, I'm happy to talk to them about whatever it is, but that's the kind of support a school nurse gives. And at Longley, whenever I send a child home, the parent may say to me, well, should I take them to the hospital? And I try to say, no, don't go to the hospital. Call your doctor. Because for the Africans, the doctor is the hospital. They haven't gained the understanding that you go to the doctor first, you go to the hospital if it's something very serious. So it's a matter of educating the families about how do they access the medical system that you and I take for granted every single day. Oh my goodness. Okay, great. So let me just say that one of my favorite parts of school nursing is collaborating with the staff about students, whether it's a 504, an IEP, or a health situation. Of course, we are involved with 504s and asthma plans, as Ronnie mentioned. I'm expecting that at the Connors Elementary School, with 6 classes in 4 grades that have to be screened for vision and hearing, we'd be looking at about 480 students that we have to screen for vision and hearing. This year, I screened 203. Martel screened 147, so that would be a big increase. And we have to fit all of those things in while we're doing all of the other things that go on in the office. For example, taking temperatures, checking sore throats, overseeing gargling, examining an ear, helping a child who's had an accident, apply a Band-Aid, send a child home, have a child asleep in the back room waiting for dismissal, administering 2 rescue inhalers, applying wax to an orthodontic braces that are hurting a child. All of these things go on at the same time, as well as filing DHS reports and writing accident reports. And everything has to be documented. Every visit is documented in Power School. Every child has a health record. Every health record has to be accessed during the year and updated with screenings and whatever else is most important. Elementary schools have more visits to the nurse because of the playground and PE accidents, socio-emotional needs. Chronic illnesses take more time. Example of the diabetic child, an elementary diabetic child that has to be followed 5 or 6 times a day. All of these things are potential concerns for me as a nurse that Connors Elementary is really going to need to have 2 nurses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this data. That's important. Anyone else? Please.
My name is Vicki Layla, and I'm at Longley. I've been there for about 8 years. And my first winter working at Longley, I was so shocked driving up and seeing the condition of the streets and sidewalks in front of the school. And so I'm just going to ask you, please consider keeping the buses for our kids. And just ask yourself if you'd want a child that you love to walk to school on those downtown streets wearing sneakers, no socks, and an inadequate coat. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other comments from the board? Ms. Ray?
I just wanted to circle back. Did transportation make it on the list?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, great. And then I'm not going to ask that.
Ms. Hutchinson?
This is a question from Mr. Webster. On your projected totals from Connors, you have 716. In the paperwork we just got from the nurse, it says estimated 950 students at Connors. Do you see that many out-of-district placements going into Connors this first year?
I do not. I think the 900 represents where that school might well be in 5, 8 years from now, but not for the initial year, no.
Thank you. And the nice lady who just spoke from Longley reminded me, and I have students that my own children who walk to school, and as an observation as a parent, this year the Public Works has been doing a fantastic job removing snow from sidewalks this year, at least in my neck of the woods. However, I haven't seen, and they usually do, them sand the sidewalks, and I've heard that they do a good job around the schools, but I haven't seen it at all in my neighborhood this year, so I don't know if it was a cutback. I don't know if something if the superintendent could look into or ask. I know I could certainly ask as a parent. I certainly could call, and I probably should have by now. I know one of my kids has mentioned that he has fallen several times, hurt himself, but recovered nicely. And it just reminded me that today they walked to school, and they said it was a very slippery and fun time to get to school, especially in 15-degree weather. So this morning, so it would be nice to see what's going on there, just citywide, because I know it's a concern with all our students, including Longley, Connors, and Martell. Thank you.
Bill, you previously said that there's approximately 120 students who live in what will be the Connors district that are placed elsewhere. Is it safe to assume that those students will continue to be placed elsewhere, or will they be absorbed back into Connors?
So what we've attempted to do is when we give student an out-of-district placement favorable decision, that unless there's something that comes up, that they can remain at that place school through 6th grade. What we don't know is if a parent that presently lives within the district, let's say they have a child at Montello or McMahon, might they decide on their own? Because if they live in the district, then we need to accept them. So that is indeed an unknown.
Ms. Frey? What would be the timeline on hearing about that? Is there a deadline, or should we start educating folks about that at this point to get a better sense of our numbers?
What we've found is that no matter what we do at this stage of the game, these decisions are typically made the week before or the week of school starting. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if that first meeting in September that there will be an update, and there could be some surprises in there and the need to make some adjustments.
You will not be with us, Superintendent Webster. Could you perhaps maybe set some guidelines for Superintendent Finn for when he comes in? I mean, that would surprise me,
Yes.
But
yes, I'd be happy to do what I can. Thank you.
Ms. Kodamash?
For clarification, do parents need to apply annually for out-of-district placement?
So it used to be that they had to apply annually, and what we found was that we're being overwhelmed in July to do 700-800 letters, and so we made the change about my recollection 3 years ago, with rare exceptions, that when we make a decision, we make it for their entire elementary school career.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to check with Bobby to see if the 6th grade and the nurse position are on the list that we have. If you could add those.
I can add those. They're not on it yet.
Okay,
I'll
thank
do
you.
it right now.
And just also to speak on like the condition of Birch Street, I know Alicia could speak on it too. I believe it's at least in the initial planning for the LCIP that there's upgrades to Birch Street, which is something I very much would like to see happen, because it is the main corridor that students that go to Longley use, and a lot of them will continue to use that route to go to Connors. So that is extremely important. So just wanted to put that fact out there too. So if you guys want to lobby the city council about that as well, that's definitely productive. Yeah.
No. Anything else for Connors? No. Fantastic. Thank you. Next. McMahon Elementary School, please.
sorry, will we be at some point going over Martell and Longley what the outstanding budget items are? Because there's money in here. I know it's probably just maintenance, but I feel like that should be verbalized.
So I think that's a good question. Is it all right if we address it now?
Yes.
So hopefully it won't take very long. If you look at the cost center report for Martell, you'll see roughly $36,000. Our expectation is that we will be working in the building through the end of September. We have removal of equipment to do. We have got, we'll be working with the city in terms of what maintenance should or should not be done. There's certain equipment in it that we might like to remove depending upon what the city's plans are. So there's a lot of work to do, but that's the anticipated cost to through the end of September.
Hi. Yes.
Sorry. Can you explain what the LCIP piece is under Martell? If we're giving it back to the city, should that be included in the school budget?
So it's interesting because I still see some things that say Pettingale on them, and I don't know whether they're charged to Geiger or what have you. But to the extent there were any LCIP projects in the past, that is the full charge for this coming year for Martell. But that may well be a cost that's going to need to be allocated elsewhere. Maybe we could take a look at that and just see how much longer that expenditure. For all I know, that was a furnace replacement 15 years ago with 5 years to go. I don't know.
Thank you.
So we have McMahon, and I just want to point out, you can spot Amber up there. She looks great, having fun. All right, so we're going to go right into McMahon's highlights.
So having been into year 2 as a principal, a lot of year 1 and 2 were building relationships with teachers and students and really fine-tuning some of the structures that we've had, and this is where our work is going next, and it's the heart of schools. So effective classroom instruction, I have incredible, amazing teachers that just yearn to grow and learn and always be better, and I want to provide them the opportunity to continue doing that collaboratively and through professional development, through observing each other and having time to work together. Differentiated instruction is another just critical component. We have students in every classroom across all kinds of levels, and it's really a fantastic opportunity to push your teaching to meet all of those student needs, but it's also a lot of work. And every child has a right to a fantastic school opportunity, and I want to be able to give that to them. And that can look like the workshop model in the classroom, where a teacher is teaching one mini lesson to the whole group and then really breaking into small groups and individual work to target the student learning so that students can best grow. But it can also be interventions. It's our special education work. It's ELL instruction. It's lots of different things, but really making sure that kids are getting the best teaching that they can to meet their needs to help them progress. Social and emotional learning is a huge component, and under this is a lot of our restorative practices work, and we've been learning about trauma-informed practices and other things to meet students' needs there, because if you have a hungry, angry kid, that doesn't matter how good your math instruction is. I need to get them a snack, and I need to have a little cool down session with some Play-Doh maybe, and then we're ready to go do our facts. And so being able to teach kids how to manage their emotions and how to problem solve appropriately is critical to being able to access education. And another aspect that is really, really critical, I've been trying to, while still being the leader, like step back and let our school leadership team kind of take this work and project our vision. So we are currently working on digging down into our real like beliefs and what we want for our school in our leadership team work. And Marie is here, and she's a member of our leadership team. And that work that we're doing is really incredible and really, really important, because it's going to keep us moving forward. And we have teachers and we have community members and parents and district folks on that team, and it's wonderful and committed. So McMahon's an amazing school, and I'm so excited to continue leading it and see where it'll go next.
Going right into the cost drivers. Again, regular instruction. So there's an overall percentage increase of 6.12%. That's driven primarily by salaries and benefits. There's technology equipment that we had spoken about. And then there's all other. And the all other has to do with all of the supplies, instructional and instructional supplies and instructional equipment. Wow, that was hard getting out.
It's a lot of instruction.
Yep. Guidance, there's a percentage increase of 17.52%. That is driven by a benefit election change. Library services is up 7.09%. That's all salaries and benefits. School administration, there's a 5.67% increase, and that has to do with salaries and benefits, and then there's some travel as well as supply reduction there of $1,086. Co-curricular is up 3.90% or $184, and extracurricular is up 3.20%, which equals $112. And then the essential items that are not included are guidance counselor and replacement furniture.
Who had the guidance counselor question from before? Did you? Oh, I had the STEM. So there was a swap. Can you talk about that, please?
So when I came to McMahon, I had gotten a second guidance counselor into the budget the year before I got there, and that position, the person who was going to take that position resigned like right before school started, and I wanted to be creative, and I really had this STEM teacher idea, because the way the guidance was happening at school is the guidance counselor, half their time was taken up teaching unified arts classes, and while that's awesome, I really want my guidance counselor to be able to be responsive, kind of like the nurse had talked about, and teach small groups and do individual work and be available for things. But I also wanted the kids to have a unified arts experience and to really increase the STEM stuff, the opportunities for engagement and experience. So I came to the board and I had this unfilled counselor position, which I absolutely need and is valuable, but like looking at the two positions, I wanted the STEM one more to free up my current guidance counselor. So I asked for a budget neutral just swap of those two positions, and it was approved, and then it ended up being an awesome year. Like, we had great experiences. Jim had brought some teachers over to see what was going on in our STEM lab, and then some of the schools last year had said, oh, this was so great for our kids. I'd like that at my school too. And that was awesome, and I'm super excited everyone did, but I still have that second guidance counselor need. So that's the history on where it came from. But we just have one guidance counselor for 700 kids, and that's really outside of like best practices. Like 1 to 350 is what it should be. And there is a lot of need at McMahon, and I'm also concerned about my amazing, outstanding guidance counselor, because like secondary trauma, like she doesn't have one to share that with. Like she experiences all of the kids' stuff that is, some of the big things that are going on, and having a partner to be able to work with and share that load on top of groups and things like that. It's really important and really needed.
Thank you. This is a general question related to guidance. So our other 700-ish size schools, how many guidance counselors do they all have currently?
So it varies, and the principal's correct me, I believe Montello has 2 guidance counselors, that Geiger has 1 guidance counselor. Pardon me? Oh, you added your second one, okay. And some schools have RTI teachers, whereas other schools don't. Because I think you've got 1 RTI teacher. Do you have an RTI teacher? You do not. So, I mean, those are some of the trade-offs.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Going back to my favorite document today, the enrollment projections. It looks like McMahon has some homeschooled folks being counted in the enrollment projections for grades 5 and 6, 1 in each. Is that? What's happening there? At the bottom of the 2019-2020 projection chart, there's, if it's highlighted in brown, it's homeschooled, and then if you look, McMahon 5th, there's 9 in self-contained / promise and 1 in homeschool. So
under state law, if there is a particular school program that a parent of a homeschool child would like them to participate in, they're able to do that. And I haven't looked, maybe Amber knows, but I'm assuming that's what it is. They may be coming in for 1 class.
I don't know about the 5th or 6th grade, but we have a couple of homeschool kids that do come in like to take the NUIA assessment and are on Power School, so we can access those kind of things. I did have one that was coming in for violin, so that's probably what it is.
I appreciate that response, but I'm not sure that's what's being reflected in these enrollment projections, and I also am not sure I understand then how they factor into funding from the state. I think it might be helpful for the whole committee to get a broader sense of how many children from each school district are being homeschooled and if they are using any services at school and what that looks like, because this is the first time.
A student, thank you. A student that is there 10% of the day would be counted as 0.1 students, but we can get that information.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting because I don't think we saw it last year, and that just surprised me this year. Thank you.
Mr. Jensen.
I have a question that's, I guess, facilities related, but I think Amber would be the best to answer it, even though I know facilities is down the road. Is it okay if I go ahead? I'll have to throw you for. I was wondering if you could just speak on particularly 2 things. One, the main office at the school, and then also in some of like the rooms, I think it's even like both wings where they have the folding dividing walls where you can kind of hear through. Could you speak on any of those things?
Sure. Facilities is tricky because like we got through several things funded in last year's budget, but then actually getting the projects together and the cost changes and being able to have the people to do the jobs is a challenge. But one of the things that Josh and I talked about to those foldable walls. So McMahon, the old McMahon, is kind of like an H. Like you have the main office hallway and then these 2 H hallways, and that's where 1st and 2nd grade is, and 3rd and 4th grade. And then there's all these like new spider wings off to the side. So kindergarten, pre-K, 5, 6, the gym and arts. So those new wings, the classrooms are really upgraded and current. So in the old H part, there's these collapsible walls in between each one, and it is noisy. So you could have a class just doing an experiment in one room and quietly reading in the next, and I'm in the classroom sometimes and you can hear everything that they're doing in the next classroom. So one of the things that we put in was to start replacing some of those with real walls with some soundproofing, and then also to paint, because it's like the old wood paneling and stuff. So I would like kids' McMahon experiences to all be in a upgraded classroom. So that's in there. Josh will talk about it.
Yes, I've been quiet because I have wax on my braces. My mouth hurts. So when you said that, I had to chuckle. Could you tell us, Amber, a little bit the difference between the guidance counselor and you said RTI, right?
And like, I think, is there some difference where certain insurance can be, yeah, talk a little bit about that.
So we have one just school counselor who's regular guidance. She's there for all of the kids, and that one's fully LPS. Our specialized programs, day treatment, for example, there's 3 clinicians there that are part of that program, and some of that pay gets through like billing through main care. So that's a little bit there. We do have, and then we also have an RTI teacher, and that RTI teacher, it stands for response to intervention, and you can do academic or social emotional interventions, and I use that position, and Tom Hood is currently in that position solely for social emotional. He does some groups, which is similar to what I would want a guidance counselor to do, and he also has a classroom, and it's kind of it can be any given thing, any given moment. So some of the things that happens, there's some kids that are on behavior plans, and they use that room as a place to go for a scheduled break, or maybe they're starting to be disruptive in class, but they just need a quieter space, so they might take their work and do it there. So that there's a lot going on there. So you could certainly compare it to counseling. He's not a counselor, it's a more certified teacher, and I think of it more as the social emotional, so you can get to the academics. So that's that.
So I know I've had experience where there's a child needs assistance, needs some counseling, but yet they don't have main care. They have their own insurance, so they're put on a list, so they're not able to be seen. So tell me, like, a little bit about what position, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that can be really challenging. So we have 3 Spurwink counselors that work out of our school that we partner with, and that all goes through main care and billing or insurance. And if a child doesn't have main care or they have an insurance that's not accepted by Spurwink, I can't do anything about that, and that can be really challenging. So I'm telling this family, this is what you need, and we don't have it. Our school counselor can help in the interim with some one-on-one sessions, but she's not a clinician. It's not therapy. It's not mental health. It's more school-based. I was fortunate enough to work at Montello, where there is a couple, I don't know if it's 1 or 2, school social workers that are paid, that are Lewiston Public Schools, so we can get around that in some way. The other thing right now, there's definitely a shortage of clinicians just in general. So I said I had 3 Spurwink. I really have 2 people and 1 position that Spurwink has had trouble filling. So I have a wait list of kiddos that have everything that really need this, and my school counselor can only do so much. And then for an additional position we have is a special ed clinician. So she primarily works with our self-contained students, just like day treatment, where that clinical component is part of their programming, but she does service some students who have counseling on their IEPs where maybe we can't service that, or it's just the right match. So it's definitely based on the needs of each student. Pam, did I get it?
So I have a follow-up question to that then. If the guidance counselor position were to be filled, how would your RTI coordinator or teacher be used at that point?
So the school counselor right now is pre-K to 6, and what I ideally would do was have a school counselor focus on 3 to 6 and another focus on pre-K to 2, and be the main contact there. I would use the RTI teacher in the same way. Like, the volume I have of unmet needs, like, in the wait list for groups that I want to get into working with our RTI teacher is massive. So I would be I'm kind of like getting the tip of the iceberg, and I would be able to expand that further. And it's definitely different. So like Mr. Hood does a few groups that are focused on zones of regulation and social thinking. So really like conflict resolution, and he's a unique person, and there's some kids that really gravitate towards working with him, and others that really work well with our school counselor. It's nice to have different personalities and different skill sets and match students with the the person that's going to best, help them grow.
I know with the zones of regulation and things like that are generally OT tasks. Do you guys have an OT at your school or somebody that consults for an OT, or is it just the RTI program?
There is an occupational therapist, but she is fully in special education, primarily working with students that have OT on their on their IEPs, and that's it. So that's not really accessible to regular ed kiddos.
Could we put that counselor position on the list, please?
Anybody thinks in the audience that would like to speak about McMahon? Please.
I don't know how well I'll speak because I'm sick. Sorry for all those school nurses. I know it's against the rules, but it is what it is. Yeah, I know. It's so good. It's like, my name is Marie Dixon. This is my 13th year at McMahon as one of the resource room teachers. I do not live in Lewiston. I commute from Topsom. Gives me time to listen to books in the car. It's an okay thing. I wanted to speak about the counseling position on two fronts. One is because the current counselor is my mentee. And so I get to see the ins and outs of what she's stressing about as a new counselor dealing with 700 plus kids and what her responsibilities and where her loyalties are. And I can tell you she's doing the best she can at every single moment. And Amber and Michelle, supportive of all the teachers. They're on the go all the time. One's down this hallway, one's down this hallway. But one of the examples, for some people know, our 6th grade group this year is a little rough on the edges. So we're doing 12 weeks worth of kindness. And Chelsea, the guidance counselor, is in with one class and myself and another person. And so we're supposed to plan on Tuesdays for Wednesday's lesson. And so she said to me yesterday, she goes, yeah, I can't join you guys. I have to watch this kid who's a runner. And it's like, so it's those sort of things that are pretty automatic. And so afterwards, she's like, what did I miss? But we can't talk about what she missed because in the meantime, she has 2 kids coming in sobbing who aren't on the schedule. They're not part of the friendship group. But kind of like we were talking about the nurses, it's the same sort of thing. Like she knows this is her schedule, but she also knows things are going to have to be changed. So again, I think supportive of the school and also supportive of her mental health. I would like to see another guidance counselor there.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it just came to mind, and I thought it'd be nice to hear from principal. I remember last year we added some fun stuff for you, right? The laptops. So was it you that you got additional in laptops, right? So just wanted to see if you can give us an update on how that's going.
Thanks. I always miss that. It's been fantastic. So 6th grade had iPads before, and while iPads have certain things they can do, they're really just not computers. And the other schools had been upgraded, and so it had been pushed back for a little bit. So 6th grade got the computers this year that are all Chromebooks, and then 5th grade had replacement Chromebooks, and 5th and 6th grade teachers are loving it for sure. The technology is extremely reliable, and for young kids who can sometimes not have the best care with the computers, they're really pretty durable and they're really easy to use. And when we 4th grade was doing, some of the teachers wanted to provide the winter NUI assessment to their students, and we had let them use the 5th grade cards for that. And I had 4th grade teachers just really happy about it because they said, like, and we use computers for lots of things, but assessing is one of them, and that a large amount of stress on both the teachers and the students during that assessment period was just gone because they weren't worried about the technology. Or you're in the middle of answering a question and your computer dies, it's really hard, and getting them all going. So it's been really reliable, and I think it's great that we're heading that direction with the replacement.
Thank you. Okay. Montello.
So we have Montello Elementary and we have Principal Jim Cliff here. And so we're going to move right into the statement that you made.
Yeah, so I think we each do this a little different in terms of what we're highlighting. And so Montello has a set of beliefs that we have really prescribed to that really guide us in both what we do and decisions we make. And always like to share those and embrace them, that we believe that all our children can and want to learn, and that it's our responsibility to invest in the development of positive, supportive, and respectful relationships with our students. And so that's just a really core belief that we hold about our students in our school. I don't know, it looks like we all did this a little differently, so I just want you to know, like, the highlight is that we're setting annual academic goals and social emotional goals that is set really comes together as part of our comprehensive needs assessment, which all of our schools do, and is not something that I do in isolation. It's done in collaboration with my leadership team, which has membership from across grade levels, discipline areas, community members, parent, and district membership. And so it is truly a thoughtful process, setting reasonable, rigorous goals in mathematics and literacy, and we always, and as importantly, setting social emotional goals. So that's just a quick highlight of that to let you know that we really are goal focused. And the way we go about our work at Montello, at working towards those goals, is implementing what I would describe as a really robust response to intervention system design. Something I think our school is really proud of, and that we've invested lots of time into and thought, and I've talked to you about that before. Our ongoing Tier 1 and Tier 2 professional development opportunities, which are primarily job embedded or district embedded. Continuing development and implementation of our restorative practices. Our extended day and extended year program, offering both Tier 2 academic interventions, STEM, social emotional literacy curriculums, and enrichment. And I just want to make sure this is highlighted in that that really came about when our school was found to be eligible for a school improvement grant 6 years ago, and we received that $2 million grant. And one of the key requirements and pieces of that grant was developing extended learning opportunities for students, and it's something that we worked really hard, and that the school board supported in sustaining it. And it is sustainable both through a combination of Title I funding and local allocation, and it's important for our students. We serve anywhere from 200 to 250 kids during the week during the school year, and the same during our summer program. And then finally, again, I mentioned it, the work we do is really, the foundation of it is through a shared leadership model. And I don't mean leadership with me and just my administrative team, but again, cross-discipline and grade level representation and community that is really working together to be thoughtful and thinking and planning for our school and our students.
Moving right into the cost drivers for Montello. Regular instruction, the overall percentage increase for regular instruction is 4.42%. It's driven primarily by salaries and benefits. There is that technology equipment replacement in for Montello, and there's an all other category that does have to do with instructional supplies and equipment. We cut those across the board, so that's typically what the all other is. Guidance, the percentage increase is 1.08%. Again, salaries and benefits of $1,301. Library services is up 13.03%. That is driven again by salaries and that benefit component. And school administration is up 3.57%, all salaries and benefits. The essential items not included, you want to talk about that?
I'd be happy to. essential items not included, I had proposed to Mr. Webster and Bobby the addition of a math interventionist position, a grade 4 teacher. I want to talk specifically about the grade 4 teacher. The enrollment today in 3rd grade is 102 students today. I have 5 3rd grade teachers, so that's approximately 20 students per classroom, and I have 4 4th grade teachers. And so using this number, which is pretty steady all school year, that will place 25 kids in a classroom, or in excess of 25 kids, 25.5 in a classroom at the start of school next year, and it's too much. It is too many. And I suspect that Luke will ask me if I have room for the teacher, and I do not. I don't. The math interventionist position is, I currently have a math interventionist position. Last year was the first year we did this, and we're just looking to expand our Tier 2 offerings for our students. My current math interventionist position is supported by Title I funds. It's probably, at this point, maybe not a reality, but I could use 5 math interventionists. The instructional equipment, in my mind, is a really modest request for what will be your least new school in the district, elementary school at least. And you know from last year, from my opportunity to talk to, I'm very concerned about the condition of the school and what it says to our students and to our employees. And it requires updating, it requires furniture upgrades, it requires equipment upgrades, and $11,000 does not buy you a lot of chairs, it doesn't buy you a lot of desks, and it certainly isn't going to put into our classrooms the kind of furniture that we're going to, and equipment that we're going to see in a brand new school. And I know that, and our staff knows that, but I think our students are deserving of a systematic approach that each year lets us upgrade our classrooms and our general environment. So it's not in there, and it's disappointing. And then the leadership stipend, I've been really fortunate to be both assistant principal and principal at Montello when we were called a failing school, when we were called a priority school, when we were called a continuous improving school, because one of the benefits that comes with the difficult terms is a lot of support from the Department of Education, particularly support for things like a leadership team. And so that support is no longer available to Montello, and I believe we do our best work when we have a team supporting that work, and I believe that the people that serve on that team deserve the compensation to put the time into that team. And I'm not sure how I'm going to navigate that part without a leadership team or without a paid leadership team. And the postage, it's really not a big deal, but we send out beginning of the year information to 700 students and their families. By school policy, for disciplinary matters, we send a written notice to parents for all of our disciplinary matters, and the postage cost just goes up. Postage is it's the cost of a letter, basically, and that's what's needed to sustain the level of postage we're using right now. But
what did you say about not having room for a teacher? I was trying to do math. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I was predicting that one of the questions would be asked that if an additional teacher would be added, would I have a place to put them? And the answer is, I don't. I currently have, so you know, a school counselor. That's the new term for a guidance counselor. And my counselors are pretty clear with me, we're school counselors. I have one working in the phys ed teacher's office space behind the gymnasium. And then I've moved the phys ed teacher further back into the old locker room. I have a speech therapist working in the other old middle school phys ed instructor's office space, which is essentially a very small space with a connected bathroom, and that's the selling point. You get your own bathroom. And I have 3 additional staff members who are working in the old locker room. That's their primary space. They don't have a direct teaching responsibility to students. It's not an appropriate space. It's not designed to have people back there. And my teachers, a staff of nearly, I don't know, 130 folks or so, do not have a teacher's room. So when you talk about self-care and a place to go, they do not have a place to go at Montello. So space is a significant, and it's a real need. And in full disclosure and transparency, we do have 3 pre-K classrooms. And I have one of our pre-K programs is a Promise classroom, which is a Head Start classroom. And that classroom, or that class, will not be with us in the fall. So I have a classroom, but I just named, I can't, however many positions I told you, plus a teacher room need. And I'm not sure how I'm not sure how we're going to reconfigure all this, but I really don't have a space to add another teacher.
We have asked Harriman to go through Montello and make a report to us about the space needs there. I think particularly with the opening of Connors, that Montello is indeed a school we need to give more attention to. And I appreciate all the hard work that Jim has done. And if that 4th grade teacher is put in this budget, I'm convinced that Jim will find a place for it.
Is there a safety concern here? I mean, there must be a limit to how many people can be in that building. I know we're laughing about it, but it really isn't that.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, I think it's the numbers of the overall student enrollment are actually down from what they were a few years ago, but the needs have increased. And when you add all the specialized programs and supports that are needed, whether it be RTI, guidance, et cetera, there isn't any extra room in that facility. And we may need to get further creative. There is, and this may not be the answer, there's at least one portable out back that's used by nutrition, and not anymore. You did get it back. You're using that. So, I mean, we don't have a good answer, but we are having an expert look at the school and make some recommendations to us.
Ms. Gortamash?
Do we have kids at Montello that are there out of district?
We do indeed, but there are also more kids in the Montello district that are going to other schools than the other way around. And that's part of, McMahon is the same thing. When the school committee elected not to redistrict some years back, we've had to use school choice to balance our schools as best we can.
I think it's really important to understand that, and I be the first to say this school board and previous school boards have been really responsive. Every time I've come to the podium and said, here's a need, school boards have been incredibly supportive of recognizing that identified need and being able to provide some additional support to students. And so the building itself, the first year I was at Montello as an assistant principal, I actually think the enrollment was 900 students on the day I started. The numbers in my head is like 908. We had 2 portables, and it felt really crowded. I never feel with the 700 students like we're bursting at the seams with students. Well, I do some days, but I think it's, we've added supports for kids, much needed supports, and when you add supports, you have to have a place for those people to work, and you have to have a place for those kids to get whether it's a small group or an individual clinical session or whatever it may be. And so we do have a number of classrooms that are shared by up to 2 or 3 staff, and we make it work. But it's really just a matter of not having the space for actual people to be able to do their work at this point. But I feel like the 700 student enrollment is doable. Really needy kids. And I also recognize that I probably have far more support supported by the regular budget than the other elementary schools in the district. And if I had more space, I'd be here telling you we still need more. So I like just really this very needy student population.
Just to say what everybody thinks I'm going to say, yeah, I mean, if we can add that extra position, I'd love to. I mean, just thinking of like the staff burden and all the efforts that we've made to kind of alleviate a lot of the staff burden that teachers have right now. Clearly, I mean, I don't think we have an answer in sight for us here, but if we can keep the conversation going as a school committee, I mean, I'd even be in favor of just adding that position to the budget and letting us figure it out later. I think it's that important. A 25 student class with the population at Montello, I think, is going to be, it's going to be tough for the teachers that are teaching that, and it's going to be tough for the students in the class learning as well. So I would just like to keep that conversation going, I guess, and see where it lands.
Oh dear. I don't know that this is the time, or I will probably get a red tomato thrown at me, but is there any thought to looping one of your third grade teachers up with the fourth grade to alleviate that burden?
I don't have my laptop in front of me, so I can't run a quick number. I have 6 kindergarten classrooms. Those feed into 5 first grade classrooms, which feed into 5 second grade classrooms, which feed into 5 third grade classrooms. So I don't have my second grade number off the top of my head, but I would, if I was a betting person, I'd put my money on that I cannot have 4 third grade teachers next year.
I think you are entirely correct, looking at the numbers. I'm trying here. Yeah, I think that number sounds really unacceptable to me, so I would be very much in favor of putting that on the list, and we will find space. I'm so sorry, Jim.
For 6 years in a row, I've said I would find space. I don't know if I will.
So I guess I want to address instructional equipment. You are talking about upgrades to classrooms, right? So when you have talked to us before, and this may have been last year or someplace in between, you've talked about how slowly you have a plan for every year doing a certain amount of upgrading. So you've been strategic about that plan.
More strategic about that plan. It's now well developed on a spreadsheet, and I've developed it for both classroom furniture with 3 tiers of furniture's awesome and new, furniture is acceptable and is working, and furniture needs to replace. And I've also done the same thing for just the aesthetics in the classroom in terms of paint and stuff like that. And Josh and I have reviewed that and toured the building, particularly for the aesthetics piece. So yes, I have that. And at this rate, at the level that would be funded, currently what's in the budget, I will never catch up. I will never get rooms up to what I would consider an acceptable environment for our students. There's no way.
So that I don't know if that's coming up with facilities as well, but that is something that I feel is essential. Thank you.
Do you want me to flag that? Do you want me to put it on? Yeah.
Anyone from the audience would like to come to the podium to speak about Montello? Okay. Make sure you state your name, sir.
Yes, I'll make sure I do that. My name is David Terrio. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology. And just as we discussed about Montello, and we discussed people and where they, their workspaces and so forth, I think I need to say that our tech support specialists in the district at Montello in particular, and this is a gentleman that has to work in the building every day like everybody else. He works out of the office supply closet, and over his head are the servers in the only place we could mount the servers, and have been there. And he's been working in the office supply closet for years at Montello. At Longley, he has a tiny little space off the library that really isn't an office of any kind. It's a table, and that's where he works. I have another one that works at McMahon, and at McMahon he works off of the stage, and he works in a room where all of the microphones for the sound system are, including the air handler that goes up above and rumbles constantly all day long in that space. Neither one of them have any windows to, you know, even talk about whatsoever. And then the only schools that have adequate spaces for these people, I would say, are the high school, which has a tech office, which downstairs, which I believe is adequate. We have the middle school that has an office that is slowly becoming smaller as they put 2 3D printers, color printers, and a big plotter printer, and kids going in to do the morning announcements and everything to that effect. And there's been talk maybe that, well, maybe we have to move them out of that space because of lack of space for other things. And then finally, so that's the middle school, the high school, and Farwell. I mean, Amanda's been great. She has a space that she gave to basically our tech integrator and the tech support specialist, that she's given them that space. And quite honestly, that's probably the best space any of them have right now, is that space right there. And I'm sure that she probably is fighting because she's got needs as well for that space. But that's what these people are working in every day. So I just thought I'd mention that little piece. Thank you.
The things I'm talking about, I talk to Bill quite frequently about, and he's been supportive in a number of ways of you know, including getting Harriman over there. Things that you sometimes forget on any given day. So for example, today, I have had 2 psychological examiners in the building doing testing for potential for students for special education. The space we found for them, one of them worked out of my office, one of them worked out of my other assistant principal's office to do testing, and if DHHS shows up, that's the 3rd principal's office. And I would say those kinds of visits are more frequent than not. They're weekly, if not daily. So we make do, and actually it's great, because if I can give my office up to Dr. Rosen for 2 hours, I don't have a reason to be in my office, and I can be out in the school. But it's, you know, we kind of get ready in the morning and know that we're going to pack and be available to move, so that the services that our kids need come first, and we just find every little nook and cranny to do it.
Okay, last round. No. Thank you very much. Geiger is last but not least.
So we have Geiger Elementary. We have Principal Cindy Gish here, and we're going to move right into Geiger highlights.
So the bad part for all of you, of me being last, is I had time to take lots of notes while other people spoke. But it's still early, right? So one of our Geiger belief statements that our leadership team worked on last year, we have up here. We believe that all children have the potential to learn, given a safe and supportive environment with high expectations. We do have 5 belief statements that our leadership team worked on last year, and that was brought back to the school as a whole, and then kind of tweaked and changed. So that was one of them that we wanted to share. Our highlights, we have, I kind of just put it under a few different topics. So social emotional, you've heard a lot about tonight from everyone. It's something we've been working really hard on at Geiger through a couple of different ways. So one of them is restorative practices. We started that last school year, implementing Tier 1 restorative practices, have continued that work this year. The great part with that is we have 7 teacher leaders that are leading cohorts of teachers every month through these dialogues and through this professional development, and it has just been really, really great. I think, you know, the biggest highlight for us is our teaching staff that is just phenomenal and really hardworking, and we have lots of really awesome teacher leaders. When we look at our data this year, we looked at our behavior data from the first day of school to December and compared it to that of last year, the same time frame. We saw a drastic drop in our behavior data. now that we're in our second year of restorative practices. So our overall number of office discipline referrals went from 580 to 369. And one thing that really stood out was our out-of-school suspensions went from 45 to 11. So that has been really huge. And I really owe all of that credit to the teachers and the work that they're doing in the classrooms, because they're really being, through this professional development with restorative practices, they've gotten more tools in their toolkit, and they're being really proactive rather than reactive in their working through these issues with students and really having those conversations with students about how they can change their behavior. And that's really made all the difference. We have done trauma-informed training with Ryan Anderson. Another piece that one of our guidance counselors has worked really hard on is a service learning project with Montello Manor. So we have 5th graders and kindergarten students that do a monthly visit over to Montello Manor, and we've actually had the Montello Manor van bring some of their clients over to Geiger to play games with the students, and it's just been phenomenal. And they're building really great relationships with some of the elderly people over there. So that's been a really great teaching experience for our kids. Another piece under that I just want to mention, and you'll see a picture later on, is our student leadership team. That it has just been phenomenal. We have 2 teachers that have taken that piece on. Our student leadership team runs all of our monthly assemblies. We don't have to do anything. They're just fantastic. They meet twice a week in the morning and they plan it all out. They have someone from every grade level go up and share what's happening in that grade level. They have a different character trait every month that they focus on, and students are recognized for that character trait. So last month was kindness, and we have students from every classroom that are recognized, and families are invited to those assemblies while their student is recognized with that award. So that's been a really nice family engagement piece as well. Academics. One of the things that I feel that we've done really, really well, and I do want to mention too, I have Kelsey and Michelle here from Geiger. That all of this is with them as well as our teaching staff. One piece that we've worked really, really hard on is our RTI process, and that has just come so far. We're meeting on kids constantly and really digging down into what is the root of the problem, and we're looking at the whole child, and we're matching the interventions to that student's needs a lot better than we were doing in the past. We have parents coming to those meetings, so they're really learning about the RTI process and what we can do and what we can offer for their students, and we're really trying to think outside the box. So for example, one of the kids that we talked about today is not a kiddo that would qualify necessarily for speech and language, but there are some articulation type things that are interfering with his writing. So our speech therapist is working with an EdTech to spend 15 minutes a day with that student, just working on some practices and drills with that student, working on those things that he needs. So we're really trying to individualize that for the kids' needs. One thing that we want to continue to work on is our Tier 1, so professional development in our Tier 1 practices in the classroom. We all know what our academic data looks like, and we can't intervene our way out of that. It's really about the Tier 1 instruction that's happening for all students in the classroom. So we really want to continue to work on that professional development for our teachers and strengthen that for next year too. 2 of the interventions that we use, and technology is a huge concern for us going forward. 2 of the interventions that we use, because we don't always have enough people to provide the interventions, are online interventions. So we have Lexia for reading and Dreambox for math that are really great interventions for students to use when their needs match those interventions. But we need the technology to be able to do that. A lot of the computers that are in the classrooms right now that they're using for these interventions will no longer be with us next year, so we really need to have that accessibility for those students to use that. The other positive piece of those interventions is that it can be used at home, so parents can log in with their students at home, they can see what their kid is working on, and they can support them through that process. When we talk about space, so we did add a STEM classroom as well this year. We had her like a traveling itinerant at the beginning of the year, and it was really, really hard. So to plan for 7 classrooms a day when you have about 5 minutes in between and you have all of these materials that you're carrying with you from one class to the next, it was a real struggle. The only room that we really had available, it's not a full classroom. We had our coaches in there, and we were using that for grade level meetings and to work with teams. So we moved them out of there. They are literally in our PTO closet. We've converted that into an office space for the coaches to use just recently. But now then it left us without a team space to meet with teams. So just recently, Michelle has bunked up with Kelsey. They're now roommates. Kelsey spends 75% of her day in the IEP room anyways. So they are sharing an office, and we've made Michelle's office into a team space to meet with grade level teams, because we are always looking for a space. Just like Jim was saying, when people are coming in to test and DHS is coming, and not to mention we have a young staff that are young mothers, so we also need a pumping location for a lot of people, and that becomes, that's another space we have to look for. So we get creative with our spaces, and we're constantly walking around the building saying there's got to be another space, and we're like looking in every little nook and cranny to see what we can try to use. So I think that's where we are. But again, I can't reiterate enough the work our teachers do every single day. They are the heart of our school, our teaching staff, and they work so hard for our students, and that's why we see the change that we do.
Going right into cost drivers. So the regular instruction article for Geiger is up overall 2.56%. And you can see there's a breakdown there. Salary and benefits is up 32,000. Technology equipment is in there, that replacement. As I mentioned in all of the other ones, the instructional supplies and equipment, there are big cuts there to help pave that way for that technology. The travel account is down. Guidance is up 7.22%, and that's strict all salary and benefit driven. Library services is up 1.75%. School administration is up 4.63%. And co-curricular is 4.16, and extracurricular is 3.33. Do you want to go over these?
Sure. So currently, I think we're in a better place than some other schools are as far as numbers wise. We have 5 classrooms for kindergarten, first and second, which has been great because we've been able to keep those classrooms at about 17, which has been fabulous. And really, I think that's supposed to say grade 3-6 for those grade level, for those class size reduction. Those 2 people would support grades 3 to 6. They will have between 20 and 23 students in each of those classrooms, 21 to 23 for grades 3 to 6. The RTI teacher, I believe, I might be wrong in this, but I believe we're the only school at this point that does not have an RTI teacher to support interventions for students both academically and behaviorally. And then the summer program money, and those amounts are really to match what we were able to service last summer. Last summer we were able to use money from our Title I budget. We took quite a hit this school year in our Title I budget just because of where we were placed in the district and then how that money's allocated. And I'm not sure, we haven't found out yet what our Title I allocations will be for next year. So I really can't count on using Title I money for this year's summer program.
Sorry. Nursing is up quite a bit at Geiger. Could you talk about that a little bit?
So that is an IEP driven cost, and Pam may be able to speak to it specifically, but it is for one student that has medical needs, and it's on her IEP.
Okay. So sorry, I'm just trying to understand, is that a new position?
funded through MAS, so it's funded through the parents, right? But it's funded through that her parents currently have hired that position. There's been some challenges with that, and that's something that has been put into the budget in case that changes.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
So is it still 2 ed techs for grades 3 through 6? Okay.
That would service those 4 grade levels.
Anyone from the audience? Wow. Okay. Oh, Miss Ray. She's not done.
I have non-Geiger questions. Would now be the time? I don't know yet.
I just want to make sure that there aren't any more Geiger questions before we move to anything else. Okay. Fantastic. Ms. Ray, other questions?
Great. So I noticed a theme now that we've heard from all of the school facilities themselves. Elementary and middle school, and to some degree the high school, have all reductions in their professional development lines. Most of the elementary schools are at least 50%. The high school is more like 25%. I was wondering if there could be some comment on that.
So we may want Assistant Principal Shabbat to give more detail, but basically in cutting the budget so that there would be no tax increase rather than cutting positions any more than absolutely necessary, we cut professional development and some of the supplies. But Sean can go into that in more depth.
I would just love to know how that fits in with our contractual obligations. I haven't done a close reading of our teacher contract in a while, I guess. And is there a requirement for a certain level, amount, space for that?
So this would be fall under the broad purview of the board's responsibility as educational policy. So there is not a requirement, a financial requirement in the teacher's contract, nor should there be.
And then my second line of questions, could we review the Longley Elementary budget that is in here as a cost center, since we have both a cost center for Longley Elementary and Longley High School? Would now be the time to review Longley Elementary.
So I guess is that for the summer programming?
So this is like Martell. So there's instructional technology in this budget. There's the utilities, the standard utilities, as well as grounds and the LCIP project. So that's to keep like the lights on and such. But then at Longley High School, that's where you're going to find all of the curriculum, all of the academic costs, which we talked about on Monday.
So there are utility lines, custodial lines also in the Longley High School budget. So I'm just trying to understand what accounts for what.
Right. So the ones that are in the Longley High School have to do with the programming needs of Longley High School. This has to do with like snowplow removal. This is actually something we're going to discuss in facilities when we go over the facilities budget. And I can break all of that down for you if you need to.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that nothing's getting double counted or anything.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yep.
It just seems like it's an odd transition in accounting for Martell being under our purview for an extra couple months into the fiscal year. Just making sure that all the pieces are in place is all.
I understand. I agree.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on topic of facilities, I know we'll get to it at a later meeting, but we did have for the facility subcommittee, which I chair, when we were discussing Martell and if we're going to continue using it as an educational facility, that we eventually decided no. Part of that discussion was an overall review of the district's facility needs, which there are very, very many. If tonight was just a tip of the iceberg, really. So we went into quite a bit of detail on that, and I'm sure we'll go into it more for the budget itself. But I do have a lot of information from that meeting, so if anybody, if anybody from the public wants that as well, you can email me. You can get a hold of Superintendent Webster, and we can certainly get the notes from the meetings. There's a lot of good information there. I'm sure a lot of it will come up in the budget meeting too, but just so you guys are aware, we do have some extra info for you.
To that, Luke is absolutely right. So when we get to the facilities, it'll be quite detailed. We have all of the projects that are not in this budget, so we'll be able to show you what all of those are based on which school, as well as more of the detail like what you were asking about, Alicia.
I know who you're talking about, so thank you. Just to follow up with Ms. Ray's information in regards to the professional development, I was just curious, and maybe if Mr. Webster could provide information, if a couple of things here, if he's spoken with the LEA in regards to that, and if it affects teachers' workshop and the school calendar for the professional development.
So we have had some quick discussions with the LEA, more in terms of what workshop days, for example, might be on the docket for Connor's incoming staff. And we are have more discussions that need to happen among management team members. But as I understand it, cutting out the additional workshop days for Connors, and so we may be looking at needing to start school at Connors 2-3 days later than the other schools in order to give that staff sufficient time to do the planning. I mean, they're going to have to figure out recess, in terms of the routine and what exits, entrances are going to be used and all that kind of stuff. It's going to take them a minimum of 2 additional days, and that's what we had hoped, but that was cut from the budget, so it'd have to come out of a regular school day.
Mr. Shabbat, come up. Your name's come up several times, and rather than you just sitting there nodding or shaking your head, whichever way, could you just speak to this issue a little bit, please?
So what exactly were you, the question?
Sure. So what I was asking is, first of all, if the LEA was part of this discussion, it sounds like they have been, and also in regards to teachers' workshops and how that affects the professional development, because it looks like there's some cuts happening, and how that affects our school calendar as well. And yeah, so that's how.
So like Mr. Webster said, having to cut PD and instructional supplies and instructional materials and books and periodicals has a direct impact on what happens in the classroom. And it's a negative impact, but we needed to come into this with the budget season and come to the school committee with a balanced budget, and that's why you'll see all the building principals have their needs up there. Those are all the legitimate needs that are not being met with this budget, and one of them are the PD lines, and it handcuffs all of the professional development that we want and need to do for our teaching staff and all of the educators in Lewiston Public Schools. But at the same time, we understand that there's limits to what we can ask the taxpayers of Lewiston to raise in local taxes to fund our schools. And so it's a balance. And in the past 2 years, like Mr. Webster said, we have added over 100 new positions. And we can't sustain that. And so this is a year where we think we need to ask as little as possible, but still recognizing there's lots of needs out there, and we're going to have to balance those needs. So it's not a good answer, but I feel like it's the honest answer, where we're having to make some cuts other than people to our budget lines that normally would have been in the budget. And one of them is PD, and it negatively impacts our ability to service our students.
So, we've heard a lot tonight about how Title I has been reallocated and schools have lost some of what they got last year and aren't sure what they're getting this year. And we're asking for budget increases and in some cases cutting things. I think it would be in our best interest if we understood where the Title I allocations are this year in comparison to last year and what schools are getting what money and how it's being used. You guys are gonna hate me, but coaches are in Title I, and if I can do professional development with Title I money, then I'd rather do that than pay for coaches and put the coaches back in the classroom. Just like I would rather have pay to play sports and put the athletic money in our classrooms at the high school. It's across the board, but I think we need an understanding of the Title I allocations to each school and how they're being spent.
So I can answer a few of those questions. We have asked the state for an update on our Title I allocations for the next FY. We won't find out preliminary numbers until the end of this month at the earliest, and the final numbers won't be finalized until mid to late May. That's typically when we find out our Title I allocations, which is obviously after the budget has been set and we're out to voters for a referendum. So that's the typical way that that's done, because the Title I allocation comes from the federal government to the state government, and then the state divides it out by to the local districts. So we won't know our final numbers for sure. We'll get preliminary numbers hopefully by the end of the month, but our final set numbers we won't know until the end, mid to late May. And PD, one last thing, PD out of Title I isn't typically allowable. We have to service students with our Title I funding. So we couldn't offset that with the cuts that we've had to make with for PD requests and other items that we've cut out of the regular ed budget. PD typically isn't allowable. We use our Title I funds to work with our students and teachers.
So I think it would be helpful, maybe you could just review with the board the process by which an individual school's Title I budget is developed, and because I know that it's a commitment for sure. Some board members have been asked to participate in those individual school projects.
Yes. So each Title I school, which is currently our 6 elementary schools, next year will be our 5 elementary schools because of Connors. And our middle school are Title I schools. The high school and LRTC are not Title I schools. And there is there's a process where they bring the stakeholders, and members of the school committee have been asked if they want to serve. I think a couple members have. McMahon and middle school. Oh, Connor, excuse me. And Mark is on the middle school, yes. And members of the school committee can be on that leadership team, parents, teachers, and administrators, where they look at their needs assessment based on the needs of each individual building, based on the data and other sources, and they develop their Title I budgets based on where those needs are for individual schools. So each individual school builds their Title I budget based on the needs for their school to help students who particularly are struggling in reading, writing, and math. And so it's a pretty extensive formula process, and that goes through the fall. We review the data, and then in the spring, we review the data again, and once we know our allocations, and then we use that funding again to circle back around and develop the budget for the next FY. So it's a year-long or 12-month process.
I thought during the last budget cycle that we had some questions about Title I funding, and it didn't seem like we were waiting on anything at the time. I thought it was we wanted to make some changes, and then we were told that legally we had absolutely no say over Title I funding. And I know, I think it was on the previous board, we talked about particularly like what coaches do, and professional development was listed as one of the main reasons. So if that's not what's being used, then I would agree with Ms. Hutchinson that we may want to get a review on what exactly the Title I funds are being spent for.
What I mean by professional development is we provide professional development in the classroom, but we don't typically use Title I funding to bring in outside presenters or send folks to conferences. We use that money for in the classroom, in the setting for professional development for our teachers or to support students in the learning environment. So everything is done within the learning environment of an individual school building.
So we've also heard that several of our schools are looking for math interventionists, so that could be spent with Title I money instead of out of our regular budget.
Math interventionists would be an appropriate use of funds.
So that's
correct.
why I still feel we need to have a better understanding of what the Title I funds are being used for, because we've got several requests for positions that Title I money could pay for. And if it means we have to reallocate Title I from where it's currently going to where it's currently needed, then that's what we do. I just can't see our staff going without the staff needed to teach our kids when there's Title I money available to use it, especially with the number of requests that were cut from the budget. I can't see this. We've got to come up with a way, and if it means we get creative, then we get creative.
So I would, like you said, Tina, Ms. Hutchinson, excuse me, a math intervention is an appropriate use of Title I funding, or a reading recovery teacher would be appropriate use of Title I funding, yes.
Would an added teacher position to reduce class sizes be an appropriate use of Title I funding?
I would say that probably would not be allowable under Title I. We do have under Title II some class size reduction teachers. I believe we have 4 of them. So we use some of our Title II funding, which is more in lines with professional development. That's where we send people out for conferences and do professional development. That's Title II. But we are allowed to use a percentage of that for class size reduction, and we do that.
And then guidance counselor, school counselors, do they? No. Okay, I didn't even know there was a Title II, or like I guess I blacked it out. I don't know. So I think it would be helpful to know the whole picture of what is where and what's appropriate, because I think as we consider this budget and we consider the taxpayer implication, but also the high need levels that we constantly talk about and should constantly talk about, we're looking at a piece of it and we don't know what we don't know. Even in our robust second year, I don't think any of us knows at all about this, and I feel like I am coming from a point of, I don't know, maybe misunderstanding, but it seems like there's a lot of different funding sources. I don't know what the lines are from there. It seems like, and it should be that the school committee is only responsible for the local tax allocation. And that's only through articles. So it's very complex, obviously, but I think if we could paint a broader picture, that would be helpful.
It is very complex, and I don't think any one person, even within two years of sitting on the school committee, can have a total aspect. It takes multiple years. I would agree wholeheartedly. And there are multiple sources, whether it's Title I or Title II, or through grants or the local budget. There are multiple sources that we access to gain or leverage to gain every penny we can to educate our students. We use every source possible and be as creative as possible to ensure the needs. And that's why we at the central office don't mandate what is in an individual school's Title I budget. That's done at the building level, because they, more than anyone, more than us at the central office or potentially the school committee, but at the building level with teachers and parents and maybe a member of the school committee involved, know what their students need at that building. And what is in a Title I budget in one building will probably look different than the other buildings because the needs are different in every building.
So I think the request about Title I came up last year. We have some sort of PowerPoint, and there was some sort of presentation. So I think we should dig back through and see what that covered, and if there are gaps between like the levels, perhaps then we could ask for more information. But I think we did get some. Of course, there is a lot of information over the course of the year, so we probably forgot. But I think we should look for what we already have, review that, and then see if there's other things we need to know.
And on that point, I think that maybe we could help the school committee at the next regular meeting, which will get, I believe, the financial reports, which includes a packet on the grants. And in that, you should be able to see Title I, Title II, Title III, local entitlement, and all those. And maybe we can just take a few minutes at least to give a little primer on those.
Madam Chair, it was Ms. Parks and Mr. Gagnon on their first year, so before I was on the board. I believe there was a presentation from a woman from the State Department of Education. If I remember the video, I think she had an Australian accent, where she discussed Title I a bit too. So I want to say like July something. I don't remember. I can find the exact date, but she talked about that as well. So that's something we could. Yep.
And I also believe that Jenny Derrigan, our grants coordinator, did a presentation, and I think that's what you're referring to, Ms. Roy.
July 16th, 2018 is our Title I presentation in the shared drive.
And Jeanette Kirk is the person that you were referring to that came and did a presentation from the state. I don't know, but she does have a cool accent.
Just an observation. It just reminded me after tonight's discussion and presentations that one, it's never easy, but Lewiston as a whole is still growing, and we attract a lot of families, whether it's from the state or actually we know all over the world, and we've become a really, over the, I would say, past 15, 20 years, become a much more welcoming community than we were probably 20 years ago. So, and that goes because we have great hospitals, social services, a transportation system. It's not everywhere, and of course, excellent schools. So, thanks to, and sorry if I'm stealing your thunder here, but thanks to everybody on behalf of myself, the school board, for your presentations tonight and for the rest of the budget season. On the other hand, on the rest of the state, as we probably know it, if not all the state, but most of the state is having the opposite discussion because they're shrinking in size. So they're having much different conversations, and we'll hear about it later, I'm sure. It does affect how their budgets work. It's actually more beneficial when Mr. Superintendent Bill Webster could explain this probably a little bit better, but when you shrink, you actually, it kind of softens the formula and how the funds work. It's much easier to work in a shrinking school budget than a growing population because some of our funds don't get received for 2, even 3 years. So it's kind of like having to predict the future, which has never been easy. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for everybody. It's never fun preparing all this. I understand it's a lot of work. It's an annual thing. And you have to come in front of us and be here later than you want to be here. So thank you for all the work that you've put into it.